Thank you for joining today. So we'll be going over a number of different things today, but the primary subject of this webinar is to talk to you about the future of work, in particular Okta Workflows, so advanced lifecycle management. So you will be joined today by myself, James Richmond. I'm the Associate Alliances Solutions Engineer for Okta, and we also have Jamie.
Yeah, hi all. I'm an Okta Certified Technical Consultant here at Somerford Associates.
We'll be taking you through a number of different things today. As I said earlier, we're going through a number of use cases. We'll also be going over workflows in a bit more detail, and of course, how this actually correlates with the future of work and why that is how we'll be working going forwards. Now, just to go over the agenda for what we'll be covering today, we've also had our introduction so far. We'll also be going over how Somerford work with Okta, what we do together, and Jamie will be giving you a little bit more detail on that. We'll then be delving into what Okta actually provides as a vendor, the different areas that we focus on, the different products in our portfolio, and how these come together to present you the future of work and how we'll be working, especially when it comes to the workflows. Now, the area, the future of work with workflows, we'll be going into a number of use cases. So we'll be showing you 4 use cases today, each of which is very different from one another. And I'll also be showing you how you can use workflows to do those tasks that are much more granular and would have required code to be used in the past. So we'll be showing you the future of that, how we can provide you a modern approach in terms of those granular activities. Those are the examples we'll be showing you today, and then we'll be taking any questions and of course answering those at the end as well. So we'll probably be saving about 10 minutes for you. So jumping right in, that's the flow of today, that's the agenda, that's what we'll be covering off. Jumping right in there with how Somerford actually work with Okta, I'll be passing over to Jamie for initial few slides, and then we'll be coming back to me and we'll be going through that a bit more in detail.
Yeah, so just an initial slide about us, about Somerford Associates. So we provide expertise for some of the largest companies in the UK, across a range of sectors as well. We've been working with Okta for several years at this point, and we very much have a cooperative partnership with Okta, and we work together to ensure we deliver as much value as we can for our customers. All of our team fully certified in the solutions that we partner with, and obviously Okta as well. And we also have a support desk available as well, where our support desk also certified and they're willing to help if anything does actually go wrong. But hopefully it won't. And and that's about some of it really.
Awesome, thanks Jamie. So we'll be running through now just a few slides around what Okta is, what our mission is, our statements, and of course giving you more of an idea around what we actually do before we delve into a bit more detail on the advanced lifecycle management and what we class as the future of work. So the first thing, of course, is Okta's mission. Our mission is to enable any organization to use any technology. And this is because there's such a varying approach to organizations these days, where the applications they may be using may be on-premise, they may be in the cloud. We're using such a vast amount of applications, and we also experience this not only in our corporate lives, but also in our personal lives too. You look, for instance, at the applications that you use on a day-to-day basis, whether that be just social media. But before long, after several days of actually looking at the accounts you access, I'm pretty sure that you'll have accessed at least 20, if not more. And you can actually keep a track of this if you do use a password vault or something at home for your personal passwords. You'll soon notice how many applications that you use on a day-to-day basis. Now, this is in our personal lives. When it comes to our corporate environments, it's even more integral that we're able to access those when we want to, when we need to. And of course, it's easy as possible, because the more complexity there is involved, the more pushback there is not only from our employees, but ourselves towards using that solution, even if in the long term, it would benefit us. So therefore, Okta's mission statement here is to show you how we can integrate and provide you that capability to actually enable organizations to use any application on any device they so wish to do, to allow them to be much more efficient in their role. But of course, there are other challenges within organizations, and it's not just about that integration. As you can see here, we've got a number of different points that are listed, and I'm not going to read them all aloud, but we can see here a few examples around the different workforce challenges that as administrators we face on a day-to-day basis. I've been a role as myself in the past where I was an IT administrator, and the challenges really are quite extensive, especially quite painful at times, around the pushback you get from your own employees because of needing that positive user experience. This being the last point on the slide here, if you don't provide a positive user experience, then you're going to get that pushback. People aren't going to adopt that product that you're trying to help them with. And of course, if it's not giving them a positive experience, generally people aren't going to use it as it should be, and therefore you don't get the full benefits of what it actually is. We also have other points on here which are so valid for our lives and have become even more relevant in today's society, especially over the last few months, and that's the increased uptake of bring your own device. We all want to use different devices to do our jobs, whether it be our own phone or our own laptop or our own personal device at home. We don't necessarily have the actual scenario where we can actually use our corporate devices. So therefore, enabling our workforce to use any device to access what they need to do their job is integral for our business and allowing them to have a modern approach to actually working from pretty much anywhere. And this is why it also factors in around our employees are not just working from a corporate office anymore. And we'll get a bit more detail on that later as to how this perimeter and this shift in paradigm is changing around our employees and how they're working differently now compared to how they were maybe a year ago or maybe 2 years ago. Things have drastically changed, and they're continually to change even more as time goes on. Now, this is before we look at any of the uncertainty and the other things that IT administrators face. In a role previous, as I spoke about, there was uncertainty in some of the actions we'd have to complete because of the information that was fed to us in the IT department. This information wouldn't necessarily be fed from a source of truth, but on a form that would be given to us by a manager that wouldn't necessarily have exactly what would be required to be done on it. So there was always that uncertainty around knowing what was having to be completed and knowing whether it was actually correct for that particular employee. And of course, this brings us across to why IT agility is key for being able to enable organizations with that modern working approach. We're working differently, as I said earlier. We have different processes in place, and we're taking on employees in many different ways. And therefore, we need to be able to provide you that capability of not only manually managing our employees, but giving you that automation to cover that whole JML process, because it is tedious and it is laborious, and there are a lot of holes in that process. Now, in the year 2020, why are we still facing these issues? Why are there still holes there around what we're trying to do when there's the capability of automating pretty much everything out there that we do as an administrator for our employees? And this has been caused by that shift in perimeter. As we've seen, and as most of us are experiencing, we're working from home a lot more. We're not going into the office as much. And by the end of this crisis, when things do gradually return back to normal, I think we will see that the uptake of working from home will be far greater than ever because people have become accustomed to having a far better work-life balance and the ability to work from where they want, having that flexibility. But with this, we need to understand the complexity behind this, and we need to provide and get rid of that uncertainty that has been faced in the past. And that's where we can provide that agility to IT. And that's how we can provide it to our employees as well. And that's what Okta can do. We can see here that Okta, as I said earlier, its mission is to enable organizations to use any technology that they wish on any device, and being able to allow our employees to access those applications without having to remember dozens of passwords, and being able to access those applications from whatever device they wish, is providing that agility, giving them that flexibility to work from where they want, using any device they wish. But furthermore, accelerating that adoption of the work from home role, this will enable our employees and the ability to use any device they want. So as you can see here on the left and on the right, we can see those applications that we provide that support and that integration with, allowing you to have that single sign-on experience and covering off that lifecycle management. What we also see on the right here is the capability of using any device to therefore access those applications. And that's really coming on to the point of what we'll be talking about in more detail today, is not necessarily our end users and how they can access these applications, but how we can provide the correct access to our employees and enable them to work from pretty much wherever they want to. And at the same time, helping our administrators to provide that capability and ensuring that security is there to protect not only the business, but the employees when they access this. And one thing that IT administrators will struggle with, and it's an area that is hard and complex to get rid of, is the ability to provision and cover off that whole JML process. And that's where workflows, and this is just giving you a very high level of what it looks like. And as I said, we'll be coming into a bit more detail on this later, on how Okta can provide that capability and the solution to those challenges around that JML process. What we can see here is a workflow in actual action. And what this allows you to do is have a completely no-code approach. And we'll be going into a bit more detail on this later as to how this actually works. But essentially what we're doing is we're taking the information that has been sourced from those source of truths or wherever it may be that you're being fed this information, and we can automate pretty much everything. Now, we'll be coming on to a bit more detail on this later as to how workflows actually works, but if you think of it as this, we're being there to automate pretty much any task that you would have done manually in the past, whether it be something even more granular or potentially tedious that you may have completed, and we're allowing you to automate it based on logic without the need for code. Now, as you can see here, and a number of the points on the left, by doing this and automating that whole onboarding and offboarding process, as well as those movers within your organization, you're reducing that complexity, you're reducing that time and increasing the efficiency within your IT administrators, because no longer are they having to work out what access or roles a particular user requires. Instead, they can use the information that's been fed to them that is accurate, using the information that already exists, completing checks without having to manually do it, and ensuring that the access that a person has on their first day is 100% correct, and that if they do need additional access, it's given to them in seconds rather than days or even weeks. So going into a bit more detail on this as to why this has actually happened and why this complexity has grown, especially over the last few months when we've become more accustomed to working from home, is because of the uptake of more applications and the problems we're seeing when it comes to those traditional methods and those legacy methods of accessing those applications. Before, we would use VPNs to access the four walls, or actually embed ourselves in those four walls of the office and access either those on-premise applications or that data that was held on-premise before. And what we're starting to see, and what we've seen even more so over the last few months, is problems around those VPNs. We're suddenly getting 90% of the workforce working from home, and as we go forwards in the future, more and more people will gradually work from home, is because now we need to provide the infrastructure to cope with that increased uptake of that VPN. Now, with more people using the VPN, it becomes less reliable. It comes down. We aren't able to access things. We get extra additional latency. And what we're seeing in the long term is the retirement of these VPNs and providing a zero trust strategy. Now, zero trust isn't really what the topic of conversation today, but it is an area related to what we're looking at. And although we're talking about allowing our users to access things, the most important thing to us is enabling our employees to actually access what they need and automating what they need access to. Now, it's okay talking about how we can provide single sign-on to our employees and our different customers, but it's all about providing them access in the first place and ensuring they have the correct level of access, whether it be granular tasks that we're completing or potentially just giving access to an application as a whole. And this is where Okta can help you. And this is why we're going to go into a bit more detail here as to how Okta can provide this. And the first thing we're going to see here is what Okta's portfolio actually consists of, and how we can address those challenges that you've experienced in the past. What we can see at the bottom here is the platform services that Okta provides. And the one we'll be concentrating on today is Workflows. And we'll see how that actually integrates or actually is contained within our solution set, which we'll see in a second. Now, these platform services come together to form the solutions found within our portfolio. And the main one, the key one, the primary one we'll be looking at today is the lifecycle management, in particular advanced lifecycle management. That's where Workflows will be fitting in. But this isn't just the only area that Okta actually works in. There are other areas we provide solutions to and other challenges we can address. As we spoke about earlier, we can provide that single sign-on approach. We can remove the need to have to remember dozens of passwords, allowing our customers or our employees to sign in once at the start of the day and then access those applications without any friction, without having to remember another password or set of credentials, but able to enforce an additional layer of authentication there using MFA. So we can really lock down those applications and enhance that security around them. We've also got the ability to address other issues in here, such as Universal Directory, using that to potentially migrate my directories or having a centralized directory to manage all of those different applications and the different areas that we need to manage the information for our end users. Now, that's just to name two of the solutions on here, and that's in one particular area we're looking at today, and that's our workforce identity. We also provide capabilities for the customer identity, whereby we can allow you to have that level of authentication or level of authorization with any of those applications that you may be providing customer authentication or access to. Now, the area that we'll be focusing on today is, of course, that lifecycle management. Now, lifecycle management is covering off that whole JML process, allowing you to provision an accounts when they're required for a user, potentially moving the accounts to additional roles or maybe even removing access along the way of a lifecycle of a user, or when a user actually leaves the organization, doing that deprovisioning, ensuring that accounts have been removed and access is no longer given, and preventing the case of orphaned accounts. Now, what we can see on this slide here are a number of different solutions on a number of different platform services, but all of these come together to actually provide that Okta Identity Cloud. And that's our solution set, where we provide that capability, where we can cover off those challenges and provide solutions to those issues that you faced in the past. Now, lifecycle management, I've mentioned a few times now, is the primary area we're looking at today, but there is one specific area we'll be focusing on, and that is workflows. So this is where we're going to go into a bit more detail around advanced lifecycle management and the workflows, as well as the capabilities of them and what we'll be seeing today in our use cases. So of course, what actually is lifecycle management? Now, lifecycle management we call LCM. We do love an acronym here at Okta, so we're going to be hearing probably a few of these, and I probably could have given at least a dozen so far on things, but I'm trying very hard not to use them. So what we can see here, LCM, what is lifecycle management? Well, lifecycle management is what allows us to provision and deprovision those accounts for our end users. What we can see here is a traditional method used by Okta to provide access to those specific applications with no real granular access controls in place. So when a user joins the organization, we give them that access. When they move into a different role, we can potentially remove access and give additional access dependent on the rules that we may have in place or defined in our Okta tenant. And then finally, when a user leaves the organization, we're ensuring that a user's accounts have been deprovisioned. Now, when we put LCM into advanced lifecycle management, we can take that a step further. We can do those granular activities. We can incorporate logic, additional actions, or have timings involved around how we want to use the information on a user to determine what access they may have. An example of this, which often comes in conversation, is Box, for instance. So with Box, we may want to have a deep account provisioning. Now, this is a use case not around Box, but Google Drive later on will be showing, or Jamie will be showing you. And we're going to be showing you how when a user leaves the organization, we need to ensure that their files aren't necessarily deleted, but their account is deprovisioned and we transfer those files across to their manager, for instance. Now, before, when in traditional lifecycle management solutions, this account would probably actually be deprovisioned and the files deleted. Now, we may want to hold on to these files for a duration of time. So therefore, providing you workflows or that advanced lifecycle management, we can give you that capability of doing those granular activities, whether that be changing permissions on certain files, transferring the ownership them to someone else, or maybe determining certain entitlements within these applications, such as Box or maybe Salesforce, to allow you to have that much more granular approach to that lifecycle management. But of course, lifecycle management and workflows does provide you this capability, and it's probably asking yourself right now, how do we actually achieve this? Now, we did show you a screen earlier on, but we are not using code, and Jamie's going to give you a bit more information now as to how we actually do this.
Yeah, so I think as James mentioned here, custom code is not really the answer to identity automation. Some of the problems we had, particularly at Somerford, before Okta Workflows, really, we had manual processes. So in deprovisioning, we normally had other actions we had to take. And obviously manual processes are good, but they take time, and also they're potentially prone to human error as well. We need a repeatable process that will work every time. Obviously, as Somerford has grown, obviously our processes have become a bit more complex as well. So there's ever more time required for that. And we kind of knew that we couldn't really use scripts or custom scripts because essentially they'd be difficult to manage and also maintain. So not everyone has scripting knowledge. So you can't always just rely on a script and maintain that going forward, and also even looking at expanding upon that script in the future. So really custom code, really not the solution we were really looking for. And that's really where Okta Workflows will come in.
Thanks, Jamie. And the other things to also add there is with code, as Jamie has said, it does take a lot of time to do. And being in a position before with having to code certain solutions together, it's not just necessarily the time to build it, but it's also that maintenance, the maintenance window of that. And when people do leave the organization after building it, you can only imagine having the time required to train new employees or actually learn what has been built in the past, because everybody has their own take on how something should be built. And that's why when we look at workflows, we're using a very traditional method, which is if this, then that logic. You may have heard of the app on your phone, which is actually called if this, then that, which allows you to actually set up your own workflows in another way for other traditional applications, such as banking, for instance. I have the if this, then that on my phone, and I use it with my Monzo account, which essentially allows me to put money into certain pots when certain tasks actually happen. Now, one of them is when it rains in the UK, I have to put £1 into a certain pot. And as you can imagine, living in the UK, how expensive that can become over time. So these are the things we can incorporate into workflows, and they're all around us in terms of how we work. So why not use it for things that we do in our own workplace, or the things that generally are quite tedious and quite repetitive, when we can use traditional logic to actually achieve that. Now, what we can see here on this slide is how we can use those conditions, or how we can manipulate the data that's fed into Okta, using the information that is already available to us, and setting up these workflows to actually provide access based on the information we already have. And you can see an example here of how we can kick off actions or initiate or have event-driven workflows around the actions that are actually completed within our applications or even in our Okta tenant. We can see here how it is just a drag and drop system, how we can manipulate that data, we can customize their username, how we can create records within Salesforce or even shift files in Box tenants. We have a number of integrations with a number of different applications, and the applications are therefore can have that much more granular activity applied upon them. An example of how we can do this as to how it works, again, going over that if this then that approach, is when something happens, we're doing an event-driven workflow. If something happens, then we're going to do this. We're going to do that change. We're going to assign that EMEA territory within Salesforce. And maybe we want to alert people. So when this happens, then do that. So we can alert people in Slack. We can alert people in Google Meets to ensure that people are made aware of the different things or actions that are occurring. And this is something we'll also be going over in the use cases later on as well. But as you can see here, it's a traditional approach. It's a common approach that we face in our day-to-day lives. So why aren't we using this in our work lives too? And actually ticking off those activities that we do on a day-to-day basis, which are very granular and could be done by automation instead. Now, when we also look at other things here, such as the identity creation conflicts, it could also be other areas of a workflow that we want to bring in custom code. So even though we're providing a no-code approach here, there may be the case that we want to have additional code involved in those workflows for things that may not necessarily be easy to integrate with, or maybe require a bit more logic in our own program languages. Now, as you can see here, we do have two different approaches here for how we can manage these different identity conflicts, and one of which we are seeing in some detail today in a use case. But one approach here is to what we've always provided in the past is what we call an inline hook. And this is where we can use custom code, which is hosted on a customer's own tenant or premise, to do these activities or incorporate them in a workflow. Or we can use Workflows, which has a no-code approach, and Okta will host that for you. So when these activities or an event drives a particular workflow, and we need to check something such as a username, whether it's been used in the past, or maybe we want to use it against certain repositories, such as websites that check to see if an account has been breached in the past. And really, this is to give you additional options around how you can manage your automation in your environment and maximizing the potential of your workflows within it. So the next few slides we're going to be going over are actually the workflows or the use cases we'll be integrating or implementing, or have been implemented, showing you how we can actually use workflows to solve those challenges you may be involved with in the past. So Jamie's going to take you through a few of those, and I've got one towards the end. So just pass over to Jamie now, I'll be taking you through some of those.
Yeah, so we've got a few use cases to show. So as you can see here, first of all, we got notify organization. So this will basically be an action. So we're going to create an Okta account, and following that, we'll just check that the user has been assigned to G Suite. And if they have, then we'll notify the organization in a chat room in Google that, well, basically we're going to welcome the user to the company by putting a message in the Google chat room. That'll be our first use case that we're going to show today. And then we've also got a deprovisioning process in G Suite as well. So this will be based on when the user gets deactivated in Okta. And from that, we'll then we will transfer their files and folders across to their manager. We'll set their email auto-reply in Gmail to tell people that they've left the company. And then after 5 days or 5 minutes in our demo, as you'll see later, we'll actually delete the user in Google Admin. So that use case will just show different tasks that need to be performed before the user can actually be deactivated in G Suite. And we can use Okta Workflows for that. And then we've got another use case here. So this is actually works with Splunk. So based on an action in Okta. So in this particular example, we've got a super administrator logging in. From there, a report is dispatched in Splunk, so we'll just run a search in Splunk to see in this particular example where that location, where that login came from, and then an email is sent by Splunk to the user with the search results.
And then the
We got one
final
more
use case, oh, sorry. And then the final use cases here we can see, which I'll be showing you later on, is how we can automate activities initiated from a particular ServiceNow client, for instance. So a ServiceNow tenant initiates the creation of a ticket from a particular user putting in a request. We can then initiate or have that event-driven approach for a workflow, using that information to determine what actual access a user should be provided. In this case, we're going to be provisioning an Office 365 account, but dependent on the details that are provided inside of the incident created in ServiceNow, that will be depending on what actual access we provide them, whether that be in the form of a SWA application, providing them a guest account, or if they're an internal user, we may be providing normal access to that application using the conventional LCM methods provided by Okta. So those are the 4 use cases we'll be showing you today. We'll be going into a bit more detail on these now over the next few slides, and then we'll be showing you some videos and giving you some detailed commentary over what is actually occurring within them too.
Yeah, so our first use case for here, we're going to start off quite simple. So this is just a very simple workflow that will post a message in the Google chat room when a new user gets created. So it's very simple. It's literally just check that they're assigned to G Suite, and then we'll just run an API call to say post a message in the chat room, and you can see a screenshot of what that looks like there. So yeah, we'll have a video of that just coming up now, and we'll just try and we'll basically commentate over and show you what's happening here. So this is the Okta workflow that we've created. We've just named it Welcome User in Hangouts. Where you can see on the far left-hand side here that the action we're looking for is user created. We've got that connected up to our Okta tenant, and we're looking at the Okta user here. So the alternate ID, which is the username of the user that's been created. So we're just going to basically wait 1 minute first, just to check that the user has been provisioned, and then we're going to read that user. So we're just going to get their first name and last name, which we'll then use in the message that we post in Google Chat. We're going to check that they're assigned to G Suite, so that's the get assigned user for application. We'll put our message in the compose there, which will send across to Google Chat, and then we'll just run a HTTP post, which is a custom API call that we're making out there to G Suite, and it's a webhook that we're doing. So we're just putting that message in that we've created, and then we're just sending that out across to the Google chat room. So I think what you're going to see now is we're actually going to go ahead and actually create a user. So we'll just give that a few minutes to create. So we're creating John Doe here. We're going to give him an email address. And I think later on we'll also put him into the G Suite users group as well, so he'll get access to the G Suite application. And then we're just going to set a password for that user as well. So just give that a few minutes as I enter the password there in this recording. And we're going to hit save as well. So we've set that up, and the user has now been created. So I think now we'll go across to Google. So we're just going to actually activate the user first, because they're in a stage state at the moment, and now the user is actually active. So now that we're just going to basically, this is the Google chat room. So all we're waiting on now is for that workflow to actually run in the background, and eventually what you'll see here is actually a message that will pop up. I am actually going to just show you the webhooks that we've got set up in Google Chat here. So you can see we've set up an Okta Workflows webhook, and that's all set up. And eventually, we'll just give this a few minutes, and that we should see a message come through. But in the background right now, the Okta Workflow is running. It will just be performing those actions that we showed you earlier. And we'll just give this a minute, and we should see a message come up. Okay, so you can see we've got one new message. And you can see there, we're just welcome John Doe to this Google chat room. And we're basically, from there, we welcome the user to the organization, and we've automated that. So that was quite a simple workflow. We're just going to show you here. This is the way to view history of flows that have taken place in Okta Workflows. So you can actually see exactly, so this is useful for debugging as well, if anything does actually go wrong with the workflows that you create. But you can see here exactly the history and see how the workflow actually ran for this particular event. and you can see how we've gone through that, and we've sent the message across to Google, and it's posted that message. In there as well, you can also just see workflows that are created or in progress. Now we're coming on to more advanced use cases. So this is where we're going to actually automate complex leaver processes. So we're not just deactivating the user in G Suite or in Okta. We're doing more actions before we get there. So in this particular example, we need to ensure that the files and folders that the user owned is transferred across to their manager. So this is when the user leaves the organization. We need to make sure that anybody who emails that leaver after they've left is notified that the user has actually left the organization. So we're going to set an out of office on that user. And then after 5 days of grace period, all the business processes that we need to run have been done. And we're just going to delete the user at that point in G Suite. So we're going to give that a bit of time. So we deactivate the user first, and then we deactivate the user in G Suite after 5 days. So this is the video that we're going to show here. So we're going to show you 3 different workflows really, and they all run at the same time. So we're going to transfer the drive data to the manager. We're going to auto forward new emails to the manager, and we're going to set an out of office as well. So just going through to one of these workflows, just to give you an example, we're looking for that user deactivated action in Okta for this workflow to actually happen. Yeah, so it will trigger when a user gets deactivated in Okta. So the user we're actually going to deactivate is Jane Doe. She currently has G Suite access, and her manager there is admin@jtsso.ovh, and we've put that in her user profile. So she has access to G Suite at the moment. She's also got access to Splunk as well. This is her G Suite account, so you can see right now, because she's actually active, she's got access to Gmail, she's got access to Google Drive, and you'll see that in Google Drive, she's got a few files here. And these files, although in this particular example, they're not important, but they could be. And we need to move them across to her manager when she leaves, so that those files are retained and they're kept, obviously, because they're business files and they're important. So this is her manager as well. So obviously her manager has G Suite access, and this manager doesn't have any files in Google Drive at the moment, but what we should see is that those files are moved across when she's deactivated. So yeah, yes, just really a recap, we're looking to transfer drive data to manager, auto forward emails, and also set an out of office on the user. So I think we're going to go ahead now and actually deactivate the user. So Jane Doe has now left the company, and we've deactivated her in Okta. So these 3 different workflows that we're looking at are going to start taking place now. So you should see, as I refresh Gmail here, might need just one more refresh there in a minute. You will see immediately that an out of office has been set. So you can see her vacation settings, and we've put a notice there. And if we go into the Gmail settings, you'll see that under her out of office, we've got an out of office set now. So thank you for your email. Jane Doe has left the company. Your email has been passed across to an appropriate contact. Please expect a response soon. So yeah, we've set an out of office. So that's the first stage done. Now we're going to look at the forwarding as well. So you'll see if we just move to the forwarding settings, we're forwarding a copy of any new incoming email to her manager. And we're just going to test that as well. So we're going to send a test email to jane.doe. And because we've got the auto forwarding now set, it should arrive at admin@jtsso.ovh. So we've sent across an email. It was sent to Jane Doe, but if you look here, we're on the manager's email account and the admin and the email account. Sorry, the manager has received that email that we've sent across. So that proves that our auto forwarding is also working. And then I think we're also just going to look at the drive data as well. So you can see now that Jane Doe, her files have kind of gone, and that's because they've been moved across. So now we're on her manager's account again. We're going to go to Google Drive, and you can see there's a new folder there that's named jane.doe@jtsso.ovh, and that's her files. So we've just moved them across to her manager now that she's left the organization. Yeah, you can see that's the manager. So we've transferred her drive data as well. And the last step here is we're just going to wait 5 days or minutes in this example. And then after 5 minutes, we will delete the user. So we've done all the tasks that we need to do. We're happy that we've followed all the business processes that we need to do. And now we can allow this user to be deleted in G Suite. So if we just wait just a little bit of time, I have sped this up in this particular video. So we should see that Jane Doe won't be able to have access to G Suite. So that means she's been deleted. We're just going to refresh this. You can see Jane Doe, she's been signed out because her account's been deleted. And if we check G Suite admin, Okta Workflows has now deleted the user and Jane Doe has disappeared. So yeah, that's the free workflows in action there. I am going to just run through how I've created those. So this is quite a complex example. Okay, so we're moving on to the second example here. So this is a Splunk example in this particular use case. So this is where we're running a Splunk report based on an action in Okta. So we've kept this quite simple. It's just if a super admin logs into Okta, we'll just run a search in Splunk that will look at the IP address and just gather some information about it. But in a particular example that you could do in Splunk is you could correlate across different data sets that you've got in Splunk already and run additional reports and searches. So yeah, again, we'll have a video here to show this. So the first thing you're going to see here is just the admin, the super administrator logging into Okta. So that'll be the login event that takes place. Okay. And then we're just going to check our emails. And we got a new email. And an Okta administrator login has been detected. And this is a Splunk email. So the Splunk has run a search and it's sent out an email and it's given us some information about the IP address. But that could be any Splunk search that you could create. Again, we've done quite a simple example there. But it's just an example of how we've integrated Splunk with Okta Workflows here. So yeah, I'm just going to go into Splunk here to show you the report that we've run. So if we go into search and we go into reports, we've created a new report here called Okta Login Detection. And that's the report that we've run through Okta Workflows. Okay, just moving on to the workflow that actually ran there, just to show you how that worked. Again, this is quite a simple example in this particular use case. So we'll just go to Splunk, and you can see we've got a workflow called Splunk Run Report. So the Okta action that we're looking for is the user has signed in. And then we've got an if statement there to say if this is an admin. So in this particular example, it's admin at jtsso.ovh. If the user is not an admin, then we just put a message and just stop the flow basically, and we just say the user is not an administrator, so we don't need to run any further. But if they are an admin, we're just going to wait for 120 seconds, and then after that, we're just going to tell Splunk by running an API call to actually run the search and send an email out. Again, another quite simple workflow there, but an example of how we integrate with Splunk. And I think that's that video. So I think that's the use case. I think James has got a use case that he's going to show now, so I'll pass across to him.
Absolutely. So the final use case here, and thank you, Jamie, for all those use cases. They're great to see. And so the final use case here we're going to see is the one we mentioned earlier around ServiceNow integration as well as Office 365. So the final one here, now there are, to keep it or make it a bit more understanding, because it can look a bit confusing because there are child flows in it, and we'll come into a bit in detail what that means later. I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview around what's going to happen in this flow. We'll then go actually into the video, see how the workflows have come together and how we can address this task of being able to provision a user based on an incident created in ServiceNow, determining whether they're an internal or an external user. If they're an external user, then we're going to provision them a guest account in Office 365, which, as you know, doesn't use any licenses and means we can keep control over any particular user that's not needing 100% access within our Office 365 tenant. So the tasks happening here within this workflow, giving you a high-level sort of chart view of it, is a ServiceNow incident has been created. Then an IT action has been provided inside of that ticket as a heading or a string that's going to be used to determine what course of action we're going to complete. Now, we have 3 different routes that this could potentially take. We're going to see this in a bit more detail in the actual video as well. The 3 routes include a new starter, a leaver, or a role change. But in any organization, you could have dozens and hundreds, if not, of different processes that could be involved there for the different actions that may need to be completed. Now, today's action is going to be a new starter. We're not going to go down the lever or a role change route, but as a new starter, we're going to call a child flow, which is going to start that provisioning process. We're going to start creating the accounts that are required for that particular user. And this is where we can see the option around whether they're an external or an internal user. Now, as an internal user, we'd probably just carry on with the normal route of provisioning an employee, whereby we'd give them the access to the applications they require, and we would give them the access granularly inside of those applications using workflows. But if they are an external user, whether this be a contractor or maybe a part-time employee or someone from another organization doing work for us, we may need to give a different level of access, especially when it comes to Office 365. So in this case, we're going to go down the route of provisioning a guest account. So if they are an external user, we're going to provision them that Office 365 guest account, and we're going to allow them to have access to that using a SWA chiclet on their Okta dashboard. So we're still going to give them access to Okta. We're just going to give them a different way of accessing it and providing a different level of access within our Office 365 tenant. Now, if we were to complete this use case for an internal user, you would see that as an internal user, we would simply assign them the internal group within our Okta tenant, which would give them access to a normal Office 365 application. So just going to go over the video now. So there are a number of different flows involved with this. Now, what you can see here on this first workflow in front of you is the first actual port of call that's going to happen when an incident is created in ServiceNow. So the way this works is that we have a number of different actions that may, or different conditions that determine the route and the course of action here for what's happening or what has been inputted in our self-service incident. Now, as you can see here, we have a number of conditions in the middle there in this card. So each of these is known as a card. On the left, this is the information we're feeding into this particular flow where a new incident is created in ServiceNow. And we also have an if and else statement set up here with a number of different conditions involved. So what you can see here is we have IT action as one of the strings provided inside of a ServiceNow incident. We've got 3 different options available in front of us. Now, as I said earlier, we are going to go with the new starter option, but we do have 3 different routes available to us here, or 4 actually, with an else statement there. But with the else and ifs there, we could say if it was a role change or if it was a lever, we could go down different flows or potentially initiate different actions accordingly. But in this case, we're going to go with that new starter. And as you can see on this particular flow, we're feeding that information in from ServiceNow on the left. And because the IT action is a new starter, we're going to concatenate them with username. We're going to call a child flow, which is going to initiate and start an action for the provisioning of a different account. In this case, an Okta new user. This information that we're feeding into this child flow is going to initiate the creation of that account inside of our Okta tenant. Now we can see this here inside this flow now. We can see that we have created a child flow. The child flow is being initiated as an event-driven approach. So the task that was called in the previous slide has initiated that approach of concatenating the details provided to us in this flow. We are creating the usernames there. So we have @richscoops.com as their primary email address. And for hypothetical reasons or for demo purposes, we've created them another email address there, which would be ideally their personal email address for that correspondence before their first day. So the actions we can see there is we've created them an Okta new user, we've activated it, and then we've come to the next stage of this flow where we're going to check to see what course of action we need to do next, whether they're an external or an internal employee or user, sorry. So what we can see here in the route of action we'll be taking today is if they are external, we're going to call another flow here for the creation of an Office 365 account. We'll also see there as we're adding them to groups dependent on that condition as well. So the external approach, we're going to add them to a group that will make sure that everybody is aware that they're an external user. And then we're going to call that Office 365 guest creation flow. However, if they are an internal user, we're going to go down a different approach here. And we're going to simply apply them or add them to a particular group that will use the conventional or standard lifecycle management to provision them a WS Federation single sign-on approach to that Office 365 account. So we can see this below using these different cards that we provided, how we can have that different approach using the information that's been fed into these particular flows and the information that was actually fed in using ServiceNow at the very beginning. So this information can be used. We can use it to create these usernames. We can determine the paths that we want to go with this. And as you can see here, because we have an external user, we're now going to move across to the Office 365 guest account creation flow. Again, we're feeding that information into that child flow. We're using that information to get the details about that user within our Okta tenant. So we're conducting a search here using their email address. We're then reading the details of that user, and then we're then using the information to then create them a username so people are aware that this is an external user. So using that compose card, we can add external to the very beginning of their actual username. So when we create that guest account, as we can see on that card there, we are aware, we have that complete visibility that this account is a guest user for a reason. They are an external user, and we can send them that invitation email, which we'll see a bit later, and we can actually initiate or create that account as a guest type. So as a guest type, they're not using a license. And then we can see here on the next stage, we're using that information around that particular user as their email address for the username, and we're also including that invitation redeem URL there. And then we're simply using Gmail to then send that invitation out to the particular user, which we're going to see coming up next. Now, what we're seeing now is the creation of an incident. So we're going to create that incident. The IT action there is a new starter. We're going to provide the user details. In this case, it is Barry Smith. Barry Smith has his details added in. He's a legal employee, so he's joined that department. That's something else we could use in the case of an incident being created here. And as you just saw, it is an external employee. Now we're fetching that live data. We're going to feed that into this particular workflow. And as you can see, we have actually populated these cards there. And you can see the actual automation going ahead where we're using the information fed in from ServiceNow. And you can see these different flows initiating and fulfilling or populating information in them and then completing the actions that are required based on the logic we have defined. So you can see here we now have another if and else statement that we went over earlier, and you can see it determined it as an external employee, and we're calling that child flow to then go ahead and create that guest account for Barry. So stepping through this, Barry has had that completion completed. So we've got his ID there. We can get the information around Barry. We can use that information then to actually create them or compose a email address for them and provide a username of the correct standard, which can then be used to create that guest account. Now, once we've sent that email out, you'll see in a second that Barry will be sent that invitation email. We've specified that as true. We've also included a number of other details there, such as CCing our administrator within our tenant to make sure that they're also informed of this change or this creation of account has been made. And then finally, you can see there the details that have populated that particular sending of an email, making sure that Barry is informed that this account has been created for him. And as you'll see now, when we go across to the mail app, you'll see that he's received his welcome invitation to our Okta tenant, and he's also received the invitation to access his application within his Okta tenant or on his dashboard. So when we move across using this invitation to access his Okta account, he actually hasn't activated this yet. What we'll see now where he has actually been added to these particular groups. When we copy this URL across to a incognito session, and when he signs in for the first time, he is going to register his account. He's a brand new user. He's registering now with a new password. He's providing the answer to that security question. And when he signs in, what you're going to see is a number of checklets actually provided to him from that provisioning of his account. One of which is that Office 365 SWA application. Now, we're not going to open this up. The plugin wasn't installed in this incognito session, but it's to give you an idea of how we can fully automate that process of providing access to a user to an Office 365 guest account and allowing them to have access instantly after their provision. So that's that use case for you in terms of provisioning from start to finish. What we also have to talk about today is where Workflows is going. There's a lot of capability in there as to the things we can do, including automating the whole customer identity journey. We've only today discussed workflows, but customer identity is another area we also focus on here at Okta, and being able to provide capabilities and workflows and the automation around the access given to our customer identities involved in our organizations is also key. What's also important is the ability to not only automate all of these different tasks and different granular activities, but being able to respond to those individual security incidents. Wouldn't it be great if you were to just be alerted by Slack or even an SMS message, or as you saw earlier by Jamie when he had the Splunk notification? Would it be fantastic if you could get these automated on every single incident that ever occurs? Well, there is some capability at the moment, but as we go forwards, our vision is bigger and greater than this, and we want to provide even more granular activities around this. And that's where we come into play with the examples of where we could go. There could be the capability of integrating with far more applications, and as we go on day by day, we are adding more applications into the integration library with Workflows. And as you know, the Okta Integration Network, which is how we provide the integrations to all of the applications within Okta tenant, is over 7,000 integrations right now. So you can see here, either via the event-initiated event, or sorry, having an event-driven workflow, or even including those inline hooks, we have the capabilities of going far further with the capability of what Okta can do, Okta Workflows can do for you. So for instance, one of which actually sticks out here is replacing those PowerShell scripts. Those PowerShell scripts can take time to actually create or actually find or use. So therefore, wouldn't it be great if you could use that automation within workflows to create those for you, or even execute those for you, and not have to have anyone who specializes in that particular area. But we also provide you the ability to improve that security management. As I said to you earlier, it would be fantastic if we could do some sort of integration. And that's what Workflows allows you to do when it comes to that security management. We allow you to create, not only see if new tickets have been created in ServiceNow, but Workflows also allows you to create tickets inside ServiceNow and look at other details that are provided in that ticket and initiate other workflows that may do other checks within our environment. So as you can see, there's a lot of capabilities, there's a lot of potential in Workflows, even with the capabilities it now has. And of course, providing this security orchestration around this Workflows approach is something we are building on day by day, and the pathway there is ever growing. So that was everything we wanted to cover today. I want to say thank you to Jamie as well for all of his help in going over the use cases he had today and providing some extra details around some of the coding approaches as well. Just wanted to open up to the audience if there was any questions and answers, or potentially any more details they would like on anything that we've seen today.
Yeah, so it looks like we do have a few questions, James. So I'll just read these out, and then I'll answer them, or I'll pass across to James if I think I can't answer them. But yeah, first question we've got here is, are there any limitations in what applications Workflows is compatible with? So I would answer that and say that there's a whole load of different integrations available. They're called connectors in Workflows. You can also have custom integrations as well. There are other different functions available. So some of the G Suite use cases that I showed today, I did do a custom HTTP API call to integrate those. But yeah, I think Okta are adding different connectors all the time. I'm not sure, James, if you had anything to add to that.
No, I think you've hit it spot on. The only thing I can add is that we do have the ability, and Jamie showed it to you earlier, is the integration with APIs. Essentially, if an application has an API, then we can pretty much do any action within Workflows. Just at the moment, the out-of-box connectors, as Jamie said, there are a number in there, and they are growing in size, but they are simply connectors that have already been built for you and provide that additional usability around it. But essentially, if an application has an API, you can pretty much complete any action within them, as we saw earlier in Google, for instance.
Yeah. Next question we've got here is, do we do any other workshops or webinars on Okta? Absolutely, we do. If you just go to somerfordassociates.com/events, you'll see all of our workshops and webinars there. So if you are interested in any other workshop, even on our other solutions that we partner with, they're all available there as a full list available. And I'm sure you'll be able to find one that you like there too. And another question we've got, can you get a trial of Workflows if you are already an Okta customer? And or is there a sandbox that you can trial on a non-prod instance as well? James, that might be a better question for you. So can you get a trial of Workflows as an Okta
Absolutely.
customer?
So if you would like more details on getting a trial or enabling it for your tenant, if you drop me an email at james.richmond@okta.com, I will happily help you and get that enabled for you on your tenant. So it is, if you would like an additional tenant to try it on, I'd be more than happy to provide you a trial tenant there as well. So then you can have that enabled on it, and you can pretty much start from scratch and do that testing on Workflows, and I'd be happy to help you in that area as well. So absolutely, if you'd like to test it or trial, then we can definitely do that for you.
Thanks all for listening. Really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and it was great chatting to you all, and I hope it was really useful what you've heard today.